See you Cara, and welcome back to the Morrigan Academy podcast, where we explore the myths, magic and mysteries of Ireland's great battle goddess. I'm Lora O'Brien. I've been walking a dedicated priesthood with the Morrigan for over 2 decades now, and working with Irish heritage, sacred sites and spiritual practice for probably a decade longer. So if you're here, there's a good chance that you're starting to feel that tug. Maybe you've seen some signs or wonder if you've seen signs of the Morrigan, or maybe you're still wondering if what's happening around you is just a coincidence or something more. So in this episode, we're asking the question that so many of you have asked me over the years: what signs does the Morrigan give? And just as importantly, how do we recognise them? How do we know for sure? Spoiler alert, you're never really going to know for sure, but we do look for patterns. And also then, what are we going to do about this? So practical solutions, practical tips, as clear guidance as I can possibly give you based on my own experience. And I've incorporated a lot of the student experiences that I've had reported back to me over the years as well. So should be something for everyone in this. Now, how the call often begins. So the call from the Morrigan rarely comes with clear instructions, unfortunately. There's no trumpet sound, no divine scroll sliding under your door. It usually starts with a feeling, like something stirring. There's a shift in how you see the world, a tightening in your gut that says, pay attention. And honestly, this can come in the form of I'm being watched by a predator, kind of pay attention. Or it can just be that gathering kind of sense of momentum, So we have a blog post over at the Morrigan Academy called Is the Morrigan Calling You? And I've laid this out visually, for people to read if they want something to refer back to as well. But just to go into it here, some of the most common early signs that people experience would be vivid dreams and strong visions, a growing sense of being watched or followed, not by someone usually, but by something. Again, there's that kind of presence that's bigger than you kind of thing, Encounters with crows, ravens, or animals acting in oddly precise ways. Recurring symbols, so blood, battlefields, sovereignty symbols such as a crown would be an obvious kind of blunt one, I suppose, or feathers, spears, that kind of thing as well would be quite common with the Morrigan. And then an emotional intensity or a sudden disruption in your life's path. I often refer to the Tower Tarot card for anybody who's familiar with that, where kind of everything has to be taken away so that you get your fresh start. Now, I know that sounds very dramatic, but stay with me, right? But let's be really, really clear here, I'm going to give you examples of stuff, and what I really don't want is people starting to fantasize or project into it. Really understand that not every weird dream or dramatic crow is a divine summons. Corvids are pretty fucking dramatic now, to be honest. And the Morrigan doesn't work on gimmicks or just that really kind of cliched stuff. Now, maybe crows are a little bit cliched for the Morrigan at this point, but you can tell her that, I'm not. But she really works through transformation, and that's everything from shape-shifting to your own transformations. And she's not afraid to turn your life inside out to get your attention. Again, unfortunately. So what does the lore tell us? How can we actually refer back to the mythology and the stories we have about the Morrigan and figure this out then into a modern context? That's really what my entire work with teaching about the Morrigan is aimed at. That's kind of my mission, is to get that authentic source information and see how it's relevant in a contemporary context. So that's what we're at here, right? And the early Irish texts really give us plenty of examples of this. We can look at the Tán Bó Ragavna, which is a pre-tale to the Tán Bó Cúailnge, where the Morrigan appears to Cuchulainn. She's driving a cow. She's brought the cow from the other world. There is another episode on which kind of stories to focus on. So I do suggest that you refer back to that. But anyway, she's driving this cow, which is an animal that represents sovereignty and power and wealth in ancient Ireland. So, you know, again, you need the cultural context and the historical context to really kind of understand a lot of this symbolism, which is why I really recommend that you read and study Irish mythology. We do have a course at the Morrigan Academy, which is Cáthmac or the Second Battle of Moytura 101, and it's really understanding it. So I go through it in short episodes, like podcast episodes, where I read it, I explain it, and there's weekly then exercises and integrations and all the rest of it, and summaries, so that you really, it's a deep dive into the Cáthmac. Anyway, if you want to really study the mythology, that would be a great resource to go to. You can find it in the courses link at the top of the Morrigan Academy. But anyway, she's here with this cow, and she appears to Cuchulainn, and really she doesn't appear to him, he appears to her, because what's happening is she's going about her business and he inserts himself into the conversation, basically. Says that all cows are his cows and what the hell is she doing and who is she, doesn't recognise her. So she warns him, but he insults her and like dismisses the whole encounter. And honestly, from that moment on, his fate is sealed. He has rejected the sovereignty goddess. I do a huge deep dive into this in my new book, which is out with Llewellyn in August 2025, so look out for that. But honestly, Cuchulainn's fate is sealed at that point. And then in the Táin Cúilne, the cattle raid of Cooley, she shapeshifts again and again. She's an eel to trip him, a wolf to chase the cattle and to kind of drive against him, and a heifer then to charge him as one of the cattle, if you like. And each one of these is a test. And when he wounds her in all three forms, she returns disguised as an old woman at a ford, and he heals her unknowingly. But she's really testing him all through the Táin Cúilne, and he continually fails. An open book test. He's not learning. He's doing everything wrong with regard to a sovereignty goddess coming at him, or coming to him even. And then in the Cáthmac, the Second Battle of Moytura, which we mentioned previously, again, that deep dive is available at the Morrigan Academy. But we have the Morrigan who, at the end of the battle, delivers this prophecy, and really it's two prophecies, and it's the negative one is quite chilling. The positive one is the potential, and then the negative one is quite chilling, which is also potential, I suppose, but unfortunately we seem to be living in the negative one currently. Go figure. So, and this is after the battle, so she's speaking truth into a time of uncertainty, which she still does, and it's poetic, yes, but also magic, and also a warning. And these aren't neat signs, they're more signposts for what is to come. They're omens, they're warnings delivered through symbolism and disruption and challenge. And that's how she works, really, through the lore. So what can that look like in our modern world, in contemporary pagan practice? How does that translate then to real life experiences? And this is the bit where, people seem to fall down. And again, we don't want to be projecting anything or, anything that we might need. We want to be really, really careful about being aware of coming at this with kind of beginner's mind and looking at it with an open perspective and really just being curious about it and trying to figure it out. So we don't want, this coloured by fear or fantasy or anything like that. So you really need, again, this is where self-sovereignty comes in, and really a lot of the work that you may be doing with the Morrigan currently or in the future will actually come down to you having the wherewithal to make sure that you're sorted yourself and to do that work on yourself before you can actually do the work that she might be putting in front of you. That is, important for you, important for the world, important for your family, important for whoever. So, some examples. one of my students had this like recurring dream. So they're standing in the middle of a battlefield, blood in the mud, and that was a very clear image for them, and a sense of this overwhelming dread pressing in around them. And again, it's that ominous presence, even, you know, before you actually see anybody or any figure, but you know that something big and bad is out there. And then in the dream it shifts to this tall woman cloaked in feathers, kind of standing at the edge of the field and watching them. And she never spoke, never moved, she just watched. And the student reported this dream repeating 3 nights in a row. And on the third morning they looked her up, looked up goddess crow feathers, and found the name Mórrígan for the first time, and found that it kind of like resonated, almost like what they said was it almost like rang a bell inside them, you know, that this was correct, this was true, that they knew it to be true. Now, I'm going to just insert a little personal thing in here. Please do not come to me and tell me your dreams, right? I am giving you the resources for you to figure this out. I am relaying something that was put into one of our communities. Obviously, you know, identifying details have been removed from all of these, and actually 2 of them are kind of an amalgamation of experiences that I've been told or seen people within the community talking about with each other and sharing with each other. And this is our private community on the Morrigan Academy, so you find a link to that on the homepage if you want to join it. There is a very small barrier of entry, which means that we don't get a lot of the usual crap that you would get on Facebook and the like. Now, we do have a Facebook group as well, which is completely free, which you are welcome to join as well, called the Morrigan's Cave, right? But anyway, that's where these are coming from, and also then from like mentor meetings and guidance sessions that I've actually had with other students. I've been working with students like this for over a decade. So I've collected a lot of these stories. I have them in my head, I have them in my heart. Some of them have really resonated with my own experiences. So I'm just giving you a small sample of this. Do not tell me your dreams, right? I'm not interested. Again, this is for you to figure out, right? I'm giving you the resources so that you can. Now, another student kept finding crows, but they were dead ones, right? And not just one, and like not in the middle of nowhere. So over about a month, they found 5 in different places right after moments of internal crisis. So one after quitting like a toxic job, another after walking away from a friend group that had grown really harmful. And each crow, what they said was like each crow felt like a punch or a punctuation mark almost. And they weren't scared. It looked like these crows had like died of natural causes. That was one thing I checked. Was somebody gone around killing crows? I mean, we do need to look at the obvious first, right? You know, do you have a teenage child who, I mean, a teenage son, let's be honest, a teenage son who has an unhealthy interest in, you know, how animals live and die, right? So that was not the case here. Absolutely not, thankfully. And maybe I've just watched too much Criminal Minds. Who knows, right? But these are the questions that I have to ask, okay? So anyway, they weren't scared by this. And even the idea of finding like a dead crow, again, when you look at the context of Irish culture, Irish history, Irish heritage, Irish society, we don't have the same view of death as this big, scary, terrifying thing. Now, obviously, we don't like it. We don't court it. But we have a very different relationship with death, let's say, than would be seen in most or many other cultures, right? So, again, they weren't scared, and they really said that they had felt like seen, like someone was confirming, yes, that was the right move, you know, and it was like, again, the crows showing up were like a punctuation mark on a chapter in their life that was able to close then, you know. And then there was somebody who had never even considered working with the Mórrígan. They weren't into deities, they weren't looking for spiritual guidance, but suddenly, Guthuban, everywhere they turned, there were stories about Irish goddesses, like Irish mythologies, just kept popping up everywhere. And then the name Bive showed up in, I think it was like a novel, in a podcast, but again, not a podcast about Irish mythology, just a different podcast that they were listening to. And then like in a piece of graffiti. So they just randomly saw it written on the street. And this was all in 1 week. And then the final straw was that they had a dream in which a hooded crow, which is the symbol of the Bive here in Ireland, as they said, they had never seen a hooded crow before. It's the grey and black crows that would be our native crows here in Ireland. They'd never seen it before, consciously at least. You know, you could make a case for, maybe you've seen it somewhere and it's in your subconscious. Okay, whatever. But consciously, this hooded crow was new to them. And in the dream, it sat on their chest and whispered, "It's time to listen." And they woke up basically out of that dream and said, "Okay, I'm listening." And then they started to like research, you know. Now, not every sign is about crows, definitely not, right? And again, if you're getting multiple crow signs, please don't tell me. Please don't email me about it. Like, I already have all the experiences gathered, right? Like, I've been listening to this for 10 years and I'm kind of sick of it, right? Which is why I'm making content like this, so that you can keep going and, again, do this processing and do this work yourself and figure it out. I've given you the tools, do it yourself, right? Unless, like, you're going to pay me for a guidance session, in which case I'll happily sit down and give you my full attention, okay? But unfortunately, I'm at a point where I just can't be listening to everybody's dreams or the fact that crows have showed up for them like 3 times in a week, right? So, not every sign is about crows. So one person told me about like a moment in a hospital that they had. They were sitting in silence after losing a loved one. So it was obviously a trying time for them. But then they heard a voice that was like clear as day. They were awake, fully awake and alert in their grief. And clear as day, the voice said, "This is not the end. There's work to do." Now, they turned around, nobody was there. You know, even like checked behind the curtain in the room and all the rest of it. And there was nobody there. But they had physically heard this voice. "This is not the end. There's work to do." And from that moment on, their life just completely shifted. They began studying, like, again, they decided that they were going to be open to kind of what work was to be done. And again, they were looking for patterns in that. And as time went on, so this is not an overnight process, but as time went on and they were paying attention and being aware, they started to see a pattern towards mythology, towards sovereignty and Irish stuff specifically, and then an Irish goddess tradition. And then the name Mórrígan, Great Queen, came up again and again and again. So again, it took a little while to kind of being aware and just kind of following where the path led them and trusting in that, because obviously this voice, for whatever reason, they trusted it, thankfully. But the name Morrigan kept coming up again and again, and then that's how they found me. So that was many years ago, actually, and I wasn't doing half as much as I'm doing now. And then I just kind of have to give you, like, I just want people to be realistic about what it means when the Morrigan is calling you, when the Morrigan is paying attention to you. Because it's not all, you know, lovely feathers floating down and you getting divine guidance and hugs from a goddess. Like, that's pretty much never the case. Again, over a decade of experience, and anytime anybody has mentioned that kind of thing to me, again, we're into that fantasy and projection situation. So I'm going to just finish the examples with this person who experienced extreme chaos every time they ignored a key decision. And unfortunately, I was part of this process. Unfortunately for me, it was very frustrating. I was teaching them at the time. They were kind of back and forth with various offerings that I was making, both free and paid. They were on my emails a lot. And it was like, you know, I was seeing the pattern. I was trying to point them in the right direction. Like, it's not my job to get between people and their gods, right? That, again, that is not what I'm doing here. This is not the one true way. I am working with my own decades of experience, but also the stories of all of the people who were physically led to the Morrigan's cave in Rathcroghan in County Roscommon. So I have gathered all of their stories, all of that anecdotal storytelling that was, a lot of it was about experiencing something that they just felt a call to, and then, they ended up in the back arse of nowhere in County Roscommon in Ireland. So I've collected all those stories, like mentally collected all those stories. I don't have an archive of them, unfortunately, but I mentally collected them, and then also then directly working with students then who have been actively seeking the Mórrigan, particularly for a decade. So like, this is a vast amount of experience, and this type of frustrating situation where I can see something really clearly, again, I am not getting involved with it. It's another reason why I don't want you sending me emails or sending me descriptions of your dreams or your visions or your experiences. It's not that I don't care. It's just that this is your work to do, right? So anyway, this one was just ignoring all of the signs, ignoring the key decisions, ignoring any advice that they were being given, not just me, but by people in a Facebook group. And it was just really, really frustrating to watch. But what was happening is this kind of extreme chaos, like computers collapsed, tech glitched, plans went completely astray, people would reveal their true colours, people that they thought that they had trusted, and it just chaos ensued, And the person later told me, thankfully, when, they had figured their shit out, later told me it was like she was clearing a path in the most brutal way possible. So again, I really want you to be prepared for this. And she continues then, once I committed to stepping up, everything settled. And sometimes when you commit to the Mórrigan, when you step up, when you agree to do the work, sometimes that's when the path gets cleared. So that would be a really common thing where people would find that, a relationship that they might not even have known at the time was kind of abusive or bad for them, that just gets cleared out, often in quite a dramatic fashion, unfortunately. Again, I'm saying unfortunately a lot in this episode because, it is a little bit unfortunate if you find yourself in a situation where the Mórrigan is calling you. I'm just being honest, right? Not trying to turn you off, not trying to turn anybody away from the path. Obviously, I'm here to guide and facilitate as much as I possibly can for you. It's literally my life's work. But sometimes then all of that kind of chaos and path clearing happens, at this stage of the process where you're not sure kind of what's going on, and then that is the message that the Mórrigan is calling you, right? So hopefully that all makes sense and is helpful to somebody. Maybe you saw yourself in it or a friend. Feel free to send this episode on to other people who you think might be affected by this. Talk amongst yourselves. Again, join the community group. It's not that there's no support for you. It's just that I can't personally give the 10,000 people who are subscribed to the Morrigan Academy my direct personal support. Okay, so that's just where we're at. Or, the 48,000 people from the Irish Pagan School, or the, I think, 8,000 people at the OM Academy. I just have not got the capacity for it at this point in where I'm at. But this is why we set up private community groups on all three of those platforms, so that you can access what you need to do within the peer support community, who are all being taught by the same sources and, trying to figure things out in the same ways. So you're not dealing with a load of randomers on Facebook either, right? So what to do with the signs. This has turned into a bit of a long episode, sorry. But what to do with the signs. So if you think that you're seeing these signs, here's what I would suggest that you do. Journal it. Again, if you've been around me for a hot minute, you know that I encourage people to write everything down. So keep track of dreams, symbols, bird encounters, strange conversation, anything that stirs something in you. Like, don't filter it, just record it, date it, maybe say how you were feeling or where you were, or, other kind of contextual information like that. And just keep a record of it, because that's how you start to see the patterns over time, right? you'll forget. Honestly, you will forget. You'll forget details. You'll forget exactly when something happened. You'll be kind of like, have I seen this before? I'm not quite sure. Right? So write it down, please. Then read the myths, the actual mythology, the lore. Learn how she already shows up so that you can recognize her when she's showing up in your own life. The signs of the past are templates for today, and honestly, she is about patterns too. She repeats these patterns through the stories in our own lives. And the mythology is teaching tales. That's literally what it's there for. That's why I work so hard to make sure that people have access to it. And again, there is free resources available in the podcast here with the three stories that, or the main mythology that you should focus on. I can't remember what the exact name of the episode is. I do apologise. But it's there anyway, the mythology, the stories, you'll see it. It's one of the earlier episodes, definitely. So yeah, and then you have deep dive stuff like the Cáthmachaire 101, understanding the Cáthmachaire, because some people need a little bit more support. So again, that's available too. Right. And again, I know I keep saying it, but look for patterns. One crow means fuck all, right? It really does. When you get into like 3 crows after a dream during a big life decision with like a line of old Irish poetry running through your head, then you're kind of onto something. If you've got common themes and repeating patterns in that way, or a pattern of, say, crow after crow after crow after crow, right? So it's the patterns that you're looking for, not just one single, a crow descended on my house and I am the blessed one of the Mórrígan. Like, don't be that. Don't do that. So then, don't rush. The Mórrigan values sovereignty. She's not chasing you down. She is absolutely not, standing over you and disappointed in you. You take your time, right? She is watching. She's waiting for you to step up. But if you don't step up, she'll just move on to somebody who will, right? So you're not going to be in trouble, right? You don't have to say yes, even if she is. And then when it's time to act. Act with courage, with clarity. She is absolutely not calling you to stay small. There is work with a capital W, all caps, shouty caps, work that needs doing in the world today. And it is my belief and my experience, based on all of the evidence that I have seen in my own journey and in my students' journeys and in the sacred sites here, and just everything in the mythology itself, everything is telling me that it is time that she is calling us for this big work, because it's really well needed, right? So, final thoughts. What signs does the Mórrigan give? She gives you the push that you've been avoiding. If there's something that you just haven't wanted to deal with, she will often step in and just, like a cat, push it off the ledge, right? She gives you the dream that you can't forget. So if you're kind of waking up and all of a sudden the dream is kind of gone, that's probably not a significant dream. Anytime that I've had significant dreams, they are very stark. The details, I can't always understand the symbolism in them, because everybody's unconscious speaks to them in their own symbolic language. So that's something really important to remember. And again, is another reason why I would never interpret somebody else's dreams, because you have your own linguistic relationship between your consciousness and your subconscious, and that is the language of your dreams and visions. But what is common is that it will feel important, it will feel detailed, it will hit you, So also then, she gives you the feather, she gives you the voice, she gives you the warning, she gives you the disaster sometimes that you have to deal with, but she also gives you the choice. And honestly, she's not subtle. So I get a lot of people wondering, is she, isn't she? It's not that she won't, it's not that she'll kind of be pushy or anything like that. That's not what I mean. But if she's calling you, you will feel it. And like, not just in your mind, but you'll feel it in your bones. You'll feel it in your soul. You'll feel it like right down at the core of yourself, that there is something pressing, that there is something that you need to be doing. And like, it's really hard to explain that feeling, so I'm doing my best here. But you will feel it. That again is a very common theme through all of the connections and relationship stories that I've heard. And look, I'm just going to put it out there as well. Your job is not to question whether you're worthy, in scare quotes, you know. Your job is to listen, to learn, and to respond with truth, honesty, and sovereignty. And that is sovereignty in the sense of your personal sovereignty, but also sovereignty in the sense of a people's relationship with the land, with the spirits, with the other world, with each other, with our ancestry. So that sovereignty is a really, really big concept, as well as our own kind of personal sovereignty journey that we're on, right? But that's more of a contemporary thing, and it's how sovereignty kind of translates into a lot of our world today. But again, I go into, there's a lot about sovereignty in my new book, The Mórrígan from an Irish Perspective, Llewellyn 2025, available everywhere books are sold. It's available for pre-order as I'm recording this, and wherever you're listening to it, you will be able to get your hands on a copy, right? But yeah, so what we're doing is we're listening, we're learning, and we're responding with truth and sovereignty. Now, speaking of listening, you can listen to all of our past episodes at Morrigan Academy /podcast, and you can find us on the YouTube channel. The Irish Pagan School YouTube channel has a podcasts list, so we're up there. The Morrigan Academy podcast is hosted up there as well on YouTube, so you'll see the red, which anything kind of with a red thumbnail on the Irish Pagan School YouTube channel is really my Morrigan stuff, you know. So have a look for that. You'll also find us on Spotify. You know, this podcast is available. So there will be a link to Open Spotify down below. So what I would love you to do is leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, or on YouTube, or wherever it is, because reviews obviously really help the old algorithms let us know that people are discovering the podcast, listening to it, downloading it, all the rest of it, right? We have courses available at the Morrigan Academy. We have a full blog available over there as well. So morrigan.academy is what you're looking for there as a baseline, and everything is linked from there. And there is also that community group. So scroll down the homepage a little bit, and there's a link to directly join a group of like-minded peers who will be going through the same things you are, in many cases, and who can give you the support that a lot of us need really in today's times. There's also a whole workshop on Is the Morrigan Calling You? What are the signs? And you can go through that dedicated workshop on recognizing and responding to her call. So it's available at morrigan.academy /signs-workshop. Again, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And until next time, honour the lore, respect the Morrigan, and slán go fóill.